Yeah. Hello, good afternoon, everybody, my dear Ambassador of the UE and Ambassador of Montenegro. Thank you for being here. It means a lot for the Mexican mission. Dear colleagues, friends, thank you everyone for joining us here today and online as well. Today, on the International Day for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Awareness, we are proud to launch the very first youth contest in the framework of the Convention on Cluster Munitions. Together with the European Union, the Mexican Presidency invites young people aged 18 and 29 to share with thinking, insights, and perspective on how the unacceptable harm caused by cluster munition impacts lives, and specifically how cluster munition impede progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals, how educating youth about cluster munition saves lives, and how the international ban on the weapons contributes to humanitarian disarmament goals. The winner will have the possibility to come to Geneva and present their submission at the 12th meeting of the state parties of the Convention in mid-September this year. I want to thank you, the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs and the CCM Implementation Support Unit for the incredible support while bringing this idea to life and for helping us organize this event. Thank you very much, Pamela, Mariana, Lotte. Thank you very much, and all the person who has contributed to realize this idea. Some housekeeping rules for our online participants. Please feel free to type your question in the chat throughout the event. We will be collecting them for the QA segment. Without any information more, I give the floor to Melanie Ringval, Chief of UNODA Geneva. Please, Melanie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Embajadora Mendez Escobar. It's an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to participate in this launch, this very important launch, youth contest, a multimedia contest, which I think is going to be able to help us revitalize and reach a different audience on such an important topic. Youth play an absolute vital and fundamental role in peace and security across the globe, but also on disarmament and international security. Your voice is necessary, it is needed, your engagement is required for us to be able to continue to spread the message of human-centered disarmament approaches and to promote the universalization of these important conventions, and in particular today, the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which is one of the backbones of human-centered and humanitarian disarmament pillars. This convention came to fruition with a huge voice and push from civil society, of which the youth networks were a big part of this messaging. And so it is absolutely fit for purpose to have, as part of one of its main events, the engagement of youth. The issue of youth engagement has also been one of the main messages that our Secretary General of the United Nations has promoted in his new agenda for peace, where disarmament is sewn across all of the pillars of development, peace, and security. And youth engagement is one of the vehicles that he hopes to mobilize. And so we hope that sincerely the engagement of this sector will help us reconnect with a new generation of ambassadors on the issue of disarmament and the importance it has in promoting sustainable peace and sustainable development across the world. And the fact that we're able to launch this today on March 5th, on the day of disarmament awareness, disarmament and non-proliferation awareness, which is an initiative that has been launched with the support of various delegations and through resolutions in trying again to spearhead the messaging and the importance and highlighting the importance of disarmament and how it can be a key tool to ensure sustainable peace. So both the day is vital, the convention that we're celebrating, but of course, the involvement of youth is something that we, as the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, celebrate, and we hope that we will have wide participation across the globe and look forward to being inspired by the messages of peace that we will receive, whether it's through drawings, art, poetry, and any other multimedia platform that you have. We are absolutely looking forward to hearing and seeing what our youth have and what kind of messages for peace and disarmament that they bring. So thank you, Ambassador, for involving us in this important event.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for stressing the importance of the youth, the participation of the civil society, and for mention the new generation of new ambassador of disarmament. I think this could be a great space for creating this kind of new ambassadors of the future and the sustainability of the peace, which is very important. Now, I would like to present, it's my privilege as well, to present Pamela Moragas. She is the director of the Cluster Munition Convention of the Implementation Support Unit. So, and I take the advantage of this time to again, Pamela, thank you very much for all your effort, for help a lot the Mexican presidents, for bringing new ideas for the convention, and for your support. So, Pamela, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I wish I could speak off the cuff as beautifully as Melanie does, but I have my written remarks, so I will go to the podium. Is it on? Yes, perfect. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Implementation Support Unit of the Convention on Cluster Munitions, allow me to extend a warm welcome to all those gathered here today, both in person and online. It's great to see such familiar and friendly faces. Thank you for being here. The CCM is extremely pleased to be part of this initiative, not only because, according to my team here, Elaine and Emad, it's the first time we're co-organizing such an event, but most importantly, because we are contributing in a concrete manner to engage and empower younger generations, providing them with the tools, the platform and knowledge, so that they can be part of the disarmament discussions, not only as passive beneficiaries, but as active key stakeholders in shaping our common future. We are pleased to launch the platform today with esteemed guests via this youth media contest, and we will continue to invite youth participation. Youth representatives will continue to be welcomed at our annual meeting of state parties as they have been in the past. The 2 last years, youth fellows from Mine Action Canada have reminded delegations attending the MSPs that, and I quote, "There is no room for cluster munitions in the future they're building." End of quote. Effective change starts by acknowledging that cluster munitions pose a humanitarian threat to civilians, both at the time of use and after conflict has ended, because of their wide area effect and the inaccuracy and unreliability of submunitions. In other words, in other less technical words, cluster munitions are a disproportionate threat and hazard to civilians, both at the time of their use as well as post-conflict. The adoption of the convention that deals with these weapons in 2008 was, again I quote, like a wild dream come true, end of quote, as one renowned expert put it. It didn't happen overnight though. 30 years transpired between the time the first proposal was put on the table and the signing of the convention. I dare say it was not the product of one generation alone, but of an intergenerational human chain, one that coalesced around the idea that cluster munitions posed unacceptable harm to civilians and therefore should be banned. Today, the convention has 112 state parties. December 2023, the last remaining state party with stockpiles effectively destroyed them. Thank you, Peru. This important disarmament milestone is even more notable with recent upsurge in conventional arms use in renewed conflicts. The world is facing profound challenges, which certainly affect us all. But we, and this is the important part, we choose to frame them as opportunities. We frame challenges as opportunities. Opportunities to secure the universal ratification of the convention, to prevent further cluster munition attacks anywhere in the world, to clear the staggering amount of cluster munition remnants, to aid the victims and ensure respect for their human rights, to foster a culture of peace and respect. This is the legacy we hope to pass on, working in concert with those most impacted, youth. Finally, allow me to express our gratitude to everyone who has made this event possible, starting with the 12th MSP Presidency, Ambassador Francisca Mendez, and her team for the excellent initiative. Credit where credit is due. Mariana, this is your baby. Thank you. UNODA, the EU, ICBL, CNC are panelists today, and the strong corps of youth disarmament advocates participating. This is a true reflection of the sense of community that brought this convention into being and will certainly secure its future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Pamela, for highlighting the importance of the unbalance between the harms of the cluster munition and the population. I think it's one of the worst examples of the humanitarian threat, and for saying as well that all the challenges that the convention faces right now, as universalization, the cleaning of the territories, and yeah, we have so many challenges, and that's why we space of opportunities, and that's why the youth is very important, because they are our present and the future as well. So I have the honor and the privilege to introduce the ambassador of the UE, Lotte. So Lotte, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, dear Francisca. Just to say that I'm very, very happy to be with you here today. I think it's a very special event, and I'm very proud to have been asked by the Mexican ambassador to join you today. I think the whole issue of Convention on Cluster Munitions is not only a very noble cause to combat, to fight against, but it's also about humanity and civilization. And you're the ones who have to pick up the baton and run with this challenge. It'll be in your hands. It's partly about this specific convention. It's also about multilateralism, which is, of course, why you're also in this initiative responding to the call from UN Secretary General Guterres, a new agenda for peace, which is vastly important. It's about the future multilateralism as well. And everything that's being done in this context here also fits into the summit of the future and the follow-up to that whole exercise, which in my view is a game changer for multilateralism, because it's about making multilateralism relevant, up to date, and topical. And this is one of the subjects that can turn that agenda into a relevant step in the future. Peace and security, youth peace and security, in line with the resolution. This is what we need to work on. The European Union has always been very, very involved in engaging with youth, trying to trigger all sorts of actions that will persuade youth across Europe, across the world, to engage, both via diplomatic, political, and financial means. So I think the message is, on the whole, we need you, and this youth contest here is one way of ensuring your involvement for the future. But participation, engagement, advocacy, awareness, campaigning, these are the things that matter if you wish to change the world. And I think that will be one of your tasks, and its inclusion across the world. This is something that applies to everybody. We've all seen the frightful, the terrifying cases of the use of cluster munitions, and the fact that you are here, both physically and online, I think bears testimony to the readiness of a younger generation to engage. We said the European Union, via a number of strategies and initiatives, try to ensure that also partner countries we work with become active at all levels, local, regional, national level, and on thematic. And I think this idea of coining the expression in Ambassadors for the Future is very, very good indeed. And if there's one piece of advice I'd give, or rather if there's something I could do differently in my life, it will be to engage at a young age as an activist. Now, there are so many courses today, and you're the ones who will have to deal with the legacy left behind, including this convention here. So activate, engage, and speak out. Let your voices be heard, and I can promise you, more than ever, I think the world will listen to you. But I'm very proud to be involved here with Mexico, and I think this course is very close to the heart of both Mexico and the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear Ambassador, to remember us the importance of the link between the youth, the Cluster Munition Convention, and the multilateralism in a wider perspective. And your piece of advice for the youth, it's super important. The advocacy and engagement, and this is why we organized this contest. It's a strategy. Context. So thank you very much, my dear Lotte. So now I have the honor to give the floor to Tamar Gabelnik, Director of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, and which is a sister of the Cluster Munition Convention. Tamar, you have the floor. Where is that?
Thank you, Ambassador, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the young people that I hope are on the call as well. Many thanks to the Permanent Mission of Mexico, the delegation of the EU, the Implementation Support Unit, for organizing this event and for inviting the Cluster Munition Coalition to say a few words. The CMC would like to congratulate Mexico and the EU for launching this youth contest initiative and confirm our commitment to taking part and promoting it actively among our members. Drawing from our experience with youth engagement, we see this contest as a vital opportunity to re-energize and renew global awareness about the convention. For us, it's about bringing the dynamism, creativity, intelligence, and optimism of young people into our fold, and we are committed to ensuring that future generations are as determined as we are to rid the world of cluster munitions. And today, unfortunately, we truly need such energy, given the pressing challenges or opportunities, thank you, Pamela, facing the convention. from increased use to new transfers, slow progress on universalization, and even one state party publicly questioning its commitment to the convention. Heavy contamination still in many countries, survivors still looking for access to their rights. The list of opportunities is long. And though the convention is a relatively young instrument itself, it is already facing competition for the attention of the disarmament community, from us all, from a multitude of more recent initiatives that have built on our model. This is why incorporating the perspectives of young people, especially in relation to the SDGs, is critical at this juncture. Engaging the youth not only keeps our focus sharp on the issue of cluster munitions, but also ensures we remain highly vigilant on these critical issues at this time. For years, the CMC has been actively engaged with young campaigners and boosting their involvement in humanitarian disarmament. With generous support from the Government of Canada, the CMC has supported Minds Action Canada's Youth Fellows program, which broadens the understanding of young people from around the world in critical areas such as mine action, gender, diversity, and environmental issues. This program has not only honed the younger generation's policymaking skills and built a solid network among them, but has also empowered them to champion a cluster munition-free world by providing them an opportunity to apply their skills via in-person advocacy, as Pamela mentioned, their presence, their very visible presence at the meetings of states parties. This initiative is yet another example of the indispensable value of youth's fresh, action-oriented perspective, underscoring their pivotal role in challenging norms and accelerating change. In closing, the CMC would like to urge everyone, young and old alike, to recommit to the cause that has gathered us here, the total eradication of cluster munitions. Let us draw inspiration from the enormous progress we have made in so little time, and from the boundless potential of our youth. Together, and with the support of this new generation, we can, and we will achieve a world free from cluster munitions. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Tamar. It's very important that you mentioned all the commitments of the youth in other countries in a humanitarian disarmament. I think these kinds of engagement and activities build up of new generation with new ideas to the application of different conventions, especially the Cluster Munition Convention. So now we pass to another step of this event, and we can listen to our expert panelists who will share their expertise and experience regarding how the unacceptable harm caused by cluster munition impacts lives. We will start with Ms. Maya Bihim, legal advisor of the Conduct of Hostilities Unit at the Legal Division of International Committee to the Red Cross. She will elaborate on how the international ban on cluster munition contributes to humanitarian disarmament goals. So Maya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And thank you to the Permanent Mission of Mexico and the EU and to the ISU for this excellent event and for having the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, participate. I'm very pleased to be here with all of you in this event. So I was asked to say a few words about the notion of humanitarian disarmament, and I'm keenly aware, of course, that there are different connotations to this notion, and perhaps my colleagues share slightly different variations of the concept. I think I would broadly describe it as an approach to understanding and responding to armed violence, including war, driven by humanitarian imperatives, and notably the humanitarian imperative to prevent and alleviate human suffering. And so this humanitarian approach to disarmament has evolved against the backdrop of new approaches to security, new security perspectives that have emerged around the end of the Cold War, notably the idea of human security. And since those of you who are actually eligible to enter into this youth contest weren't around at that time, so it's perhaps good to recall that traditionally arms control and disarmament mechanisms centered on state-centric thinking, like the defense of the state against external military threats, so very broadly speaking. And so these disarmament mechanisms are therefore mainly concerned with the kinds of weapons that have the potential to destabilize the international order, or that could spark or escalate interstate wars. And so this could be, for instance, ballistic missiles or other major conventional weapon systems or nuclear weapons. Now, when the Cold War came to an end, these mechanisms and instruments were seen to be somewhat inadequate to address the violence and suffering experienced by so many people whose lives and livelihoods were threatened by weapons such as small arms, pistols, machine guns, landmines, and explosive remnants left over from wars long past. So to protect individuals and communities from the harmful effects of weapons, the harmful effects documented in actual practice, humanitarian disarmament initiatives seek to establish new norms and often call for the development of internationally agreed rules, including legally binding instruments such as international treaties like the Convention on Cluster Munitions, or before it, the Ottawa Convention, the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, and then more recently, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, to mention just a few. The International Committee of the Red Cross has been a promoter of constraints on weapons used in war for a long time. This is because we are an independent, neutral organization that seeks to ensure humanitarian protection and assistance for victims of armed conflict and other situations of violence. And the ICRC staff, ICRC delegates are therefore often present on the ground in armed conflict situations, and there they bear witness to the effects, the humanitarian impacts of the weapons that are being used. And so they have also borne witness to the devastating humanitarian impacts of cluster munitions across many conflicts where these weapons were used. Pamela has already mentioned it, so I'll only briefly touch upon the kinds of problems that were witnessed or that we continue to witness in practice. These are related to cluster munitions being basically a container that contains multiple sub-munitions. Cluster munitions can be launched from the ground or air-launched. And then these sub-munitions are scattered over a wide area. It can be several football fields wide in size. So scattering explosive munitions basically over an area, that's one threat to civilians in this area. And then large numbers of these sub-munitions in practice fail to explode as intended, and therefore pose an ongoing threat to civilians until they are safely cleared, basically. So many thousands of civilians and many children and young people have been killed or injured by these weapons over the years. And their presence makes farming dangerous, hinders reconstruction, and so on. The ICRC undertakes a variety of activities to address the harm that is being caused, including provision of medical treatment, physical rehabilitation of survivors, but also activities to prevent injuries and reduce the socioeconomic impact of living in contaminated areas. And we promote international norms to prevent and address this concern. So specifically, the ICRC has a mandate to strengthen international humanitarian law, or IHL in short, and universal humanitarian principles to preserve a measure of humanity even in war. And humanitarian disarmament initiatives, they both build on IHL, on this existing set of rules, and they also strengthen it. So perhaps just briefly to say that IHL already restricts the means by which parties to an armed conflict may fight. And it lays down that the only legitimate aim that warring parties may pursue is to weaken the military potential of the enemy. And from there flow a range of rules, such as that civilians must never be attacked, and among them also a rule that prohibits the use of weapons that cannot be directed at a military objective or whose effects cannot be limited as required by IHL, and so as a result would harm indiscriminately. Now, these rules are binding on all parties to armed conflicts, but of course there are different views in practice on whether a particular type of weapon is prohibited or not under international humanitarian law. And that is where humanitarian disarmament instruments such as the Convention on Cluster Munitions really make a significant contribution by markedly strengthening IHL and by making it clear that this type of weapon is prohibited. So the Convention lays down a comprehensive prohibition on cluster munitions. States that bind themselves to the Convention, so states parties, they also need to destroy their stockpiles, they need to clear contaminated areas and provide age and gender sensitive assistance to victims. Perhaps just in conclusion, and to say that the Convention on Cluster Munitions itself is of course a work in progress. There are challenges, as we are well aware, and opportunities to address these. I think one of the most remarkable aspects of this and other conventions is the norms that they set that have effects way beyond the circle of states parties. The norm that has delegitimized cluster munitions as a means of warfare. So using these weapons is associated with a certain stigma, and that is a remarkable achievement in itself, but it is also an achievement that needs continuous work from all stakeholders. Such norms, they can again erode if we are not vigilant. And it is therefore, I think, particularly pleasing to see coming generations, young people, engaging with this topic and tackling this issue, since it will demand of all of us, diplomats, but also students, activists, and so on, to keep upholding the norms enshrined in the Convention and reinforcing the stigma. So I think you're speaking here now to the younger people in the room and online. So your active engagement with this issue in a way that resonates with your and coming generations is essential to protecting people affected by wars today and in the future. And as I can also say, and perhaps many of us here as well from personal experience, dealing with war and weapons can be a difficult thing. It can be overwhelming and devastating and depressing. But I, for my part at least, have found that active engagement with these topics and collective action, as we see it materialize in the framework of this convention, collective action to bring about positive change can be immensely empowering and bring about new opportunities that we can then work on together and explore together, be it through creative expression, as in this context, or through other ways. So I'm looking forward to see your contributions to the contest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maya. I would like to stress 3 points of your interesting intervention. The first one is the importance of the progression of the Disarmament Convention, including, of course, the Cluster Munition Convention, because it's not a fixed convention. We have so many opportunities, and we can modernize the convention with the new threats. So, and that's why the presidents of the different countries are important. The second one, it's very relevant to speak out about the victims. And you mentioned children, youth, women, which is so important to bearing in mind. And the third one, the link between the international humanitarian law and the Cluster Convention munition, which is, we are trying to work very hard with Pamela to stress the importance into the convention of the respect and promote the international humanitarian law into the convention. So thank you so much, Maya. Our next speaker is Mr. Matthew Laurel. He currently works as the program manager of the Explosive Ordnance Risk Education Program. In this capacity, Matthew coordinates the activities of the risk education team aimed at strengthening locally led and owned risk education responses, developing innovative responses to address challenges faced by practitioners, and increasing commitments and resources toward risk education. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you to the Permanent Mission of Mexico, to the delegation of the EU, UNODA, and the Implementation Support Unit of the Conventional Cluster Munitions, and my fellow panelists for the opportunity to talk about a subject that I'm really passionate about. It's what we call currently explosive ordnance risk education, or the form and mine risk education. So I'd like to take you on a short journey to explain why risk education is important, why it is more important than ever, what it is, and mostly I would like to give you, everyone online who is participating in this context, some tools, but also hopefully some inspiration for you to get involved in this contest, to pick one of the three topics, namely humanitarian disarmament, the Sustainable Development Goals, or risk education, and come up with a creative piece that can be used. But before I sort of dive into what risk education is, I would like to sort of tell you a story. We all like good stories. I don't know if you know the story of the hummingbird. Anyone? No? All right. So in today's world, as mentioned earlier, we might feel very overwhelmed by bad news and problems and challenges. There's also opportunities, like Pamela mentioned. But the story of the hummingbirds is about this massive forest that is being consumed by a fire. And all the animals in the forest decide to leave running. And so they stand on the other side of the river, powerless and helpless, looking at their home burning down to the ground, except for this little hummingbird, who starts flying quickly to the closest stream and picks up water and goes and drops one drop by drop of water onto the fire to extinguish it. And so it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Meanwhile, all the other animals, including elephants with massive trunks who could basically pour gallons of water or liters of water on the fire to extinguish it, are just standing there hopeless. And so they stop and they tell the little hummingbird, the fire is too big, you're too small, your wings are small, your beak is small, you're only dropping, 1 milliliter of water on the fire, it doesn't really help. And so the little hummingbird stops and looks at everyone and says, I'm doing the best I can. And I think that this story really talks to us here in the room, but also to youth in general. Everything we do, even the smallest thing we do in the world of disarmament, can have an impact. So I wanted to move on and give you this message of hope and an inspiring story before sharing some global figures that explain, sort of illustrate why humanitarian disarmament, but also risk education are key. So 140 million. So 140 millions are the number of people displaced by conflict today in the world, according to UNHCR, by the end of 2023. 84%, according to the Global Protection Cluster, explosive ordnance, so cluster munitions and landmine, represent a medium to a high risk in 84% of humanitarian operations in the world. So this basically tells us that humanitarian disarmament, mine action is a key sector, are key activities that need to be further integrated into broader protection answers, development answers, and human security more generally. So this is also a very hard figure to see. There's about 5,000 victims that were recorded by the Landmine Monitor in 2022. Almost 1,200 are victims from cluster munitions in 2022. That was the high number of casualties of cluster munitions since 2010. So 2022 was particularly fatal, and will probably go on the rise with figures in 2023. So the presence of landmines and explosive remnants of war are immense threats just by their presence, but it also, as we know, blocks access to aid, healthcare, water facilities, humanitarian aid. It also generates suffering and consequences that are not visible, psychosocial consequences. People also leave their homes due to fear, due to reprisals, etc. So you also see here that 85% of all casualties registered in 2022 are civilians, and half of those are children. But what can we do about this? So there's a field of work called mine action, and mine action is an umbrella term that is used to refer to all the activities that are addressing the risks and the consequences of landmines and explosive remnants of war. It has 5 main components, and risk education is one of those components. The other one we always hear about is clearance or demining. So risk education, like any of those pillars that you see on the slides, are guided by international standards that are called International Mine Action Standards. And they're basically a summary of all the global good practice that is being collected. And it's transformed in affected countries into national standards. I'm mentioning this because if there's youth online or in the room who want to work on a risk education piece, I invite you to go and see the International Mine Action Standard 1210. It's on the website, and you will get guidance on how to develop a material on risk education. So you're not alone. There's references. So what is risk education? I should have started with this maybe, but so it's all the activities that are aimed at raising awareness, but also changing people's behaviors when it comes to the presence of explosive ordnance. So there is a science between changing people's behavior. When you think about COVID-19, we were bombarded by messages through all different channels and streams, and we ended up basically changing our behaviors through those multiple channels. So it is really about understanding what the threat is, what type of explosive ordnance is affecting our population, who's at risk. Is it women? Is it boys? Is it men? Is it girls? Is it the shepherds? Is it people working the land? You need to understand who your target audience is. And you need to understand what the risk is and why they're taking risks in order then to be able to define messages and then decide which approaches you will be using to deliver those messages and hopefully not only raise awareness, but also promote behavioral change. I think COVID is a really good example if you look at all the campaigns that have been developed to promote behavioral change. And again, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every context is distinct. And in order to develop a risk education campaign, you need to do first and foremost a needs assessment. A gender and diversity needs assessment and context-specific assessment to see, as I said, who's at risk, where, why, and why people do what they do. So it is much more complex than what some people could think. It's not just about developing a leaflet and saying, don't go, don't touch. So why does risk education matter? Well, it is, even though clearance is the ultimate solution, so demining and removing the artifact is the ultimate solution for people to move back safely, risk education remains a prior means of preventing new casualties in conflict, and especially during emergencies. It can be a life-saving activity. For instance, at the cross-border, when you have refugees crossing in a conflict, you could have sessions and messaging, but you could also promote messages through social media. Mine's advisory group, my colleague will be talking later, they have developed a lot of Facebook ad campaigns in different parts of the world, in the northwest part of Iraq and other countries in emergencies. And it is an obligation to states parties to the Convention on Cluster Munitions under its Article 4, but also its Article 6 under International Cooperation and Assistance. So risk education is embedded into all the key IHL conventions. So the Convention Against the Use of Landmines, the Convention on Cluster Munitions, the CCW, and its AP Protocol 2. So who delivers risk education? Well, local grassroots networks and actors, Red Crescent and Red Cross national societies through their volunteers. Youth groups, I didn't put them on the slides, but youth groups are extremely active in countries, and community focal points. And obviously there's a lot of national, international, and governmental organizations that also deliver risk education with the support from donors and governments. So what does risk education look like for those of you who are online and want to say, oh, but how do I do this? Well, risk education is a sector that has evolved a lot over the past couple of years, especially during COVID, because communities were difficult to reach. So organizations had to find new ways of reaching them through messaging. So you have a list online there. This is the list of mass and digital media tools. So there's campaigns through Facebook ads, WhatsApp, there are apps, there are virtual realities, augmented realities, e-learnings. And there's just also low-tech solutions, because we have to be really careful when we develop risk education to ensure that we don't sort of make the digital divide even worse. We have to make sure that we know if people are literate, if they have access to internet, what the coverage is. We have to know what sources of information people use and what sources of information they trust. So it can be influencers on YouTube, it can be TikTokers, it can be religious leaders, it can be heads of communities, you name it. But you have to find that channel to make sure that the messages will be trusted and listened to. These are in-person sessions that are done. So there's two types. I said mass media and digital, and then there's in-person sessions that can be delivered through all these means that are on the screen. And it is key to say that those means are complementary. They don't replace one another. Face-to-face does not replace a digital campaign, because communities have to trust the message. People have to know you to be able to trust the message and act upon it. So for everyone who wants to get started on risk education, the GICHD, it's the organization where I work, it's a tongue twister, like a lot of the acronyms that we use, has developed an e-learning, an introductory e-learning, to sort of give you the basics on what risk education is. It's been taken by over 3,000 people already. So if you want to know how to start, you can go on the website and sort of get started by looking and doing the e-learning. It takes an hour. So I think that with this, people online and hopefully some of you here in the room, I think that now you know what risk education is, what it looks like, what you can do, and why this work is very, very necessary. And I would like to end coming back to our hummingbirds. I think as everyone has said in the panel, I think you all have a role to play wherever you are, and I invite you to be your own hummingbird and bring your drop. The state of the world requires a reboot of humanity and energy to meet the challenges before us, including that of making sure that everyone is safe from the dangers from explosive ordnance and cluster munition remnants. So allow me to conclude by thanking again the Permanent Mission of Mexico, the ISU-CCM, the delegation of the European Union, UNODA, and everyone else. I think that this initiative illustrates the transformative power of working together towards a common cause. So I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing this beautiful and inspiring story about the hummingbird. I don't know if you know that is our symbol of the Mexican presidency. I don't know if you did on purpose or not, but thank you so much. It means a lot for our Mexican symbol of this president. Thank you as well for the figures. It's very important to know the statistic and the impact of the cluster munition. It's very impressive. And thank you as well for give us all the information about the risk education. I was talking to Pamela. We are taking the course, of course. So thank you so much, Matthew. So, well, now we have the Dr. Ricardo Labianco, International Policy Manager at the Mines Advisory Group, and an international lawyer specializing in public international law, with a particular focus on the intersection of human rights and disarmament. He will focus on how cluster munitions impede progress toward the sustainable development goals. Thank you so much, Ricardo.
Thank you very much, and especially the mission of Mexico for inviting me and Mines Advisory Group. I'm representing Mines Advisory Group, and let me also start immediately by saying that nothing of what I'm going to say today would have been possible without the efforts of all my colleagues in the field. That, I mean, I think it's worth reminding of them. And yes, thank you very much, the Permanent Mission of Mexico. And I also want to, like Pamela did, I really want to say a specific thank you to to Mariana, because I know that this is really your idea, and I'm really glad that we can support however we can. So I don't have a beautiful metaphor like Matthew, but I hope to be at least as much inspiring as the previous presentation, providing a little bit of another example of another topic for this contest. And this topic is the connection between humanitarian mine action and sustainable development, in particular with the case of food security. Let me start that let me also add that I'm really honored to kind of support, and we are all very happy and mugged to support this youth contest, especially because, I mean, the youth, I mean, we do need the youth inspiring and out of the box thinking, and in order to strengthen this convention and its important function that we just heard, the function of and the meaning of the convention and humanitarian disarmament more broadly, like Maya explained earlier, it's a work in progress, and so sometimes we do need fresher minds. So let me dive into the topic of my presentation, and here I pasted one of the paragraphs of the preamble of the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which is the one speaking of the economic and social impact of cluster munition contamination, and in particularly on the livelihood of the people living in or near contaminated areas. I wanted to bring the attention to all of you here today in person, but also online, to this paragraph in the preamble for two reasons. The first one is the fact that we should never forget to look at the preambles of treaties, because they actually provide an interesting snapshot on the framework, on the history of those treaties, and they might even go beyond. They might beyond what the black letter law says in the treaty, and they can be sometimes much more inspiring than the provisions of the treaties itself. But at the same time, the other important reasons why I brought this here, brought this specific paragraph here, it's to show that actually we can say that the Convention on Cluster Munitions had the SDGs in its own DNA, probably even before having the very Sustainable Development Goals agenda. So, going a little bit into the topic of food security, let me mention a little. So when we speak about food security, we are looking. I brought here in this slide the common definition that we find that we find reported by FAO, WFP, and all the specialized agencies working on food security. And as you can see in this definition, we are actually looking at a very broad concept of that goes beyond the mere letting people feed themselves. Okay, so there are a lot of references here. You can see, for example, one of my favorites are the reference to dietary needs and food preferences, which interestingly it has been seen, and this section has been seen as referring also to cultural habits, food habits. So when we speak about food security, we really speak of a wide variety of elements, including what food means for peoples and communities. And of course, then looking at the SDGs, the SDG looking at food security is definitely SDG number 2, which mentioned food security explicitly, but also immediately we can see the references from this only definition. We see the references to at least SDG number 1, so no poverty, and 3, good health and well-being. I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler of a few next slides. You will see that there are much more references to other SDGs, and I'll come to that in a few minutes. So this today I wanted to give you a kind of preview. So this is the first publication that here you see in the slides. The first of 2 publications on that MAG is working on food security, the contribution of humanitarian mine action to food security. This, as you can see, it says preliminary findings from Lebanon, because these are actually the organized trends that we collected from around 30 interviews to members of the communities living in or near contaminated areas, but also currently contaminated, but also formerly contaminated, because MAGA has been working, and as well as other organization has been working to actually make to clear those areas. So, like I said, there were different reasons for us to look at food security, and actually let me say something very important. This work drew significantly on the experience of the Geneva Center, and that has a project. If I remember correctly, it's titled Beyond Square Meters, in partnership with UNDP. And actually, the way we see this project is like a continuation of what the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining started. What we wanted to look at this was actually, like I said, we wanted to learn the lived experience of people and communities. So we adopted a qualitative research approach. So we went and interview peoples and communities. And the second point is that we wanted to look at assessing in detail the impact of contamination on food security. And this is actually particularly important, and let me make a direct reference to cluster munition contamination. The problem with cluster munition contamination, which is something that we all remember, and I could hear that earlier previous speakers mentioned, cluster munition contamination creates a sort of cluster munition create a contamination that is three-dimensional. It cannot be approached in the same way to landmines that are traditionally two-dimensional, because landmines can only be on land. So generally, but cluster munition, because they are airdropped, you can find farmers, for example, can find cluster munition remnants on trees, and so this actually increase the level of fear and impact on and obstruction on kind of farming activities on which a lot of people can rely on. So the other thing that we wanted to look at in this project was also to, and this is also a little bit of I hope a part of the inspiration for the potential participants to the contest, is also to challenge a little bit traditional ways in which this kind of research has been done. And what we wanted to do was to look at both the restoration of pre-conflict situations, pre-conflict conditions, but also we wanted to see how mine action can actually create new opportunities and innovation. So, for example, let me give you a quick example. If mine action manages to unlock access to water, it means that in that particular area, farmers can actually try to aim to farm a new type of crops that possibly earlier were not available because of the lack of water. Another point around which the methodology for this study was built was the holistic focus. So we went beyond looking only at unlocking the release of land, but we wanted to look at the overall impact on the food system of the country. So looking at the supply chains, markets, and also cities. Because, for example, one of the interesting findings that we found from this preliminary research was actually that we think that mine action is something, or actually cluster munition and other types of contamination is something that affects only farmers because they can't access the land in their proximity. But at the same time, in the case, for example, of Lebanon, we saw that meant also undermining the supply chains towards cities, for example. So a little bit on the findings of this preliminary first part of the project. So we overall find that the fact that humanitarian mine action contributes to the condition for and drivers to food security was actually a reality that was felt by people and communities. In particular, here I summarized a lot of those findings, speaking of effectiveness and efficiency of the country's food system. So in terms, for example, of quality, so farmers actually work better and work more, can actually produce more. Price, and like I said, also tradition, for example, making possible the cultivation of crops or other farming activities including shepherding, that are traditional of the region that was contaminated. And as you can hear also, this impact on culture can also be seen as part of the harmful, unacceptable harm that a cluster munition contamination can create. Also, a part of the cumulative effect, the hiring of permanent and seasonal workers. So actually creation of further food security, because food security can also create it through employment and so of people in the sector. And also technological innovation in the sense that unblocking opportunities through humanitarian mine action means also facing in a better way economic crisis, but also climate change. Like climate change, I mentioned we actually researched a lot on the access to water, for example, that was made much more available thanks to the work of the miners. Kind of a cross-cutting theme and conditions and drivers is also social cohesion, because accessible land become more, and so it's actually a reduction of one of the causes for conflict, because conflict might surge because of the attempt to access cleared land, if cleared land is not very much available, but also accessibility to new actors. And this is also an example, for example, of kind of innovation. So, for example, with more land, with more confidence, and with more efficiency and effectiveness of the food system, that also means creating more opportunity for example, for women and small business owners. And as you can see, as promised, I mean, here there are much more SDGs that can be that can actually to which humanitarian mine action can contribute. So let me conclude with some final thoughts, which are some thoughts that overlaps between what we saw from the overlaps between the findings of this research project, but also some part of inspiration for the potential participants to this contest. One thing that we heard earlier, Maya speaking about different interpretations of IHL, and that in that case sometimes can actually be problematic when they are restrictive of the protection to civilians. But there is also a beauty of various interpretations, and like Matthew was saying earlier, a lot depends on the context and the communities and the understanding. So I really look forward to seeing how the participants will interpret this concepts like human security, want, fear, security as well, that are pretty much connected to the lived experience of each of the people that are affected by these terrible forms of contamination. It's very important that the focus needs to be contextualized on the needs and views of people and communities, because of course one solution doesn't fit everything. Like Matthew was saying earlier, we speak of, I mean, it's also important to look at the different HMA pillars, and in particular, and speaking of having listened about risk education, for example, played a crucial role in this specific context, especially when we speak of cluster munition contamination, because it's actually one of the few actions that allow access to land. Like I said at the beginning, we need really thinking outside the box and then holistic views. This is everything for me. I hope this was actually an inspiring example, and I'm really look forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, for bringing us this relevant case study in Lebanon, and for explaining in a very wider way the connection between the food security, the SDG, and the Cluster Munition Convention. This is a very relevant example. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming from the United Kingdom for this presentation. I appreciate it a lot. So, now we have a very special guest by video message. She is from Argentina, Lizzy Ferrero. Is a Mine Action Fellow since 2023. She's an international relations student at the National University of Rosario, Argentina, who has been actively engaged in disarmament and human security since 2020. So, muchas gracias, Lizzy, por estar con nosotros. You have the floor.
Hi everyone, my name is Lizzy and I just wanted to encourage you to take the step into the disarmament world. So, who am I? I'm a passionate advocate for peace and disarmament. I started my path as a volunteer during 2020 in disarmament and human security, and nowadays I work in social media and project assistance at APP in Argentina and CELAC in Latin America. In my own journey, I've dedicated myself to raising awareness about the devastating impact of weapons proliferation and advocating for their elimination, and I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunities of sponsorships, contests, funding that came across my way and got to tons of young activists, students, young professionals who wanted to know more about how we can have an active role in making the world a safer place. Last year, I had several opportunities to participate in international conferences, thanks to APP and the CELAC network, and also became a fellow on Mines Action Canada program, who got me working directly towards eradicating cluster munitions and promoting its convention. I even got to participate as an in-person fellow on the 11th meeting of states parties to the Cluster Munition Convention at the United Nations, where I had the privilege to meet and collaborate with young activists from all corners of the world. We joined forces to lobby diplomats and raise awareness about the urgent need for disarmament. It was very inspiring for me to see so many passionate young fellows coming together for this common cause, and I'm certain every single one of us has a role to play in this matter and can and will make a difference. I'm also here to call on you to join us. Now, you might be wondering, how can you get involved in disarmament efforts? Well, let me tell you, there are so many ways to make your voice heard, and here's an incredible opportunity for you to make a real impact. The Youth for Humanitarian Disarmament Multimedia Contest is a chance for you to share your ideas, perspectives, and solutions for building a safer world, free from the threat of weapons. So, why you should apply to this contest? Well, not only will you have the opportunity to showcase your creativity and knowledge, but you'll also be joining a community of like-minded people from all over the world who are dedicated to making a difference. So please don't miss out on this chance to be part of something meaningful. Take action, stand up for what you believe in, and together let's work towards a world where the peace and disarmament are not just ideals, but realities. I'm thrilled about this contest. We all should be involved and participate in initiatives that allow us to share our thoughts, our experiences, and our solutions for building a safer world free from the threat of cluster munitions. In these turbulent times, our voices are being heard. And remember, the power to create change lies within each and every one of us. We can make a difference and transform the world one action at a time. And I'm eager to watch, read, and enjoy all the amazing creations you are going to present for this contest. Thank you for being part of this occasion. Thank you for being part of this occasion, and best of luck for all of you.
Muchas gracias, Lizzie. Thank you for your inspiring and enthusiastic message to the youth. So we are finishing this event. We have a little bit of time for question and answer if you want. Or in the online participant, if they have some questions. Bueno, el micrófono. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mexican Permanent Mission, and also the ISU and EU and everyone who made this possible. I'm from the Austrian delegation, and for us, I mean, for me, it was very interesting to hear the different aspects also on risk education, also its connection with food security and the humanitarian disarmament as a broad sense. I think for Austria, any initiative that raises awareness on these issues is very welcome and very necessary. And also from a personal experience, I can say that I think anything that makes the topics of disarmament or cluster munitions more approachable is very welcome, because it sometimes feels a bit difficult to get in, or it feels very technical. It feels like very much expertise is needed, when I think it is necessary that everyone can participate and everyone has the tools to participate in these issues, and to kind of more democratize these processes also. And I wanted to ask if there is an opportunity within the youth contest, or also in a broader sense, for engagement with survivors, because I think for Austria this is an important topic, to be able to hear the voices of survivors and to be able to learn from their experiences. And also this might be an opportunity to make this topic of cluster munitions a little bit more approachable, I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, another question, and then.
Yeah. Thank you very much, the ISU and the EU delegation, Mexico Permanent Mission. Thank you for this important event launch. I think for developing countries, this is very welcoming. And if you look at the status of our youths, you know, is to involve them and to encourage their participation, especially in such matters. The youths are vulnerable, and so engaging them positively, I think, is a very important thing, because sometimes, you know, their vulnerability can lead them to this kind of wrong hands to engage in violence, and, you know, even leading them to so many other things. I think what I want to suggest, or maybe it is already there, is there any possibility to ensure that in the competition or the contest, the youths are going to put all their hearts in it, and I'm sure they're going to be sharing information or things that they will have in their hearts. So is there going to be a follow-up to ensure that those youths are able to implement or follow up onto some of the things that they will be putting in the competition, and to help them, you know, so that it can be sustainable and so that they can also realize what they want to portray? Thank you.
Thank you. There is another question, and I can answer some. And okay. No, of course, thank you. The Austrian mission to be here. Of course, we have to do more promotion on the Geneva ecosystem, and thank you for your question, and of course as well the other question. I mean, we have to promote a lot, not only the contest. We have to still promoting the Cluster Munition Convention and the importance of all aspects and areas of opportunity. So,
thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Lioba and Baturu, for excellent questions, and I hope to just provide a glimpse of an answer. Lioba, on survivors, there is it is essential to have survivors join the meeting of states parties. There is sponsorship, and delegations are encouraged to have survivors join their delegations. Nevertheless, what I saw during my time as a diplomat as well was we need to be careful to avoid the tokenization of survivors. If they are going to participate in the meeting of states parties, it's not just as poster child or children, but also as persons that can recount their experiences, share what they feel are the best practices, what they have felt is their experience in a positive and constructive manner. That's what I can say on that issue. But Turu, on the follow-up, me personally, I think this contest is an excellent idea. It's a first-timer, as I mentioned, but I would very much like for this to be repeated, and also, as you mentioned, a follow-up, not only because of the ideas that can come about this contest, but also because I think, as with many issues in disarmament, it's not a touch and go. It's not just about, okay, we will universalize in this region, and then another presidency comes, and we leave that aside and we go to the next. It's the same thing here. We need to provide a platform that will constantly be there for youth to engage, and as you mentioned, consistent follow-up to the initiatives, to the ideas, and it has to be a two-way street as well. Our feedback should be important to them. Their ideas are of paramount importance to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Are there any questions? Or if our panelists want to? Well, so we are in the finish of this event. I just want to remind you that the deadline of the contest is on 16 June, and you can see the information in the website clusterconvention.org. So hopefully we have so many participants, and well, we will continue to promote the contest at the convention. There is yeah. Yeah.
Lead into a couple. There was a first question from one of the participants online. I think this is for you, Matt, regarding how to ensure inclusive risk education around with the Convention on Cluster Munitions. So how to ensure inclusive risk education. I will maybe just read out 2 or 3 questions in the interest of time. A second question was on what to do for engagement. A PhD student who wrote in and said, how can I be engaged? I've written articles about disarmament. I want to be engaged. So I think that goes out to anyone who wants to answer that following you, Matt. And then a last question on logistics. Maybe Pamela, you or someone else can just, or Mexico can add a word on where and when these submissions would be displayed. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you for the question, the person online. So I think that any risk education interventions, as I mentioned, starts with the needs assessment and also what we call a gender and diversity assessment, meaning that if you're an organization and you want to get involved in risk education, you have an obligation to consult, work with the communities you will be serving. So that means that you need to ensure that in that needs assessment, you will be talking to all different layers of the community and society, from the local authorities down to the community leaders, marginalized groups, so people maybe with disabilities, women, boys and girls, and there's tons of different methodologies that are used. Group discussion, focus groups, interviews, you name it, barriers analysis, etc., that are used in order to involve as many people as possible in that analysis. But it doesn't stop there. We also have, we're also accountable towards the people we serve. So we also need to make sure that we ensure the feedback of communities throughout the project cycle. That means that if, for instance, we deliver a risk education campaign in a refugee camp, depending on the context, you could have a box with for feedback. You could have a free phone line for people to call and provide feedback, positive or negative, etc. So it is something that is embedded into the entire project cycle of a risk education program. I don't know if my colleagues want to complement Tamar or Ricardo. I hope that answers the question. And it's also embedded, so I finalize with this. This is also embedded into what we call the International Mine Action Standards that I mentioned earlier. So number 1210. So the personal line, if you go and you look at mineactionstandard.org, you'll find all the information there. Thank you.
Can touch on the next one. So this is to address the question from the PhD student, but also to talk about also the follow-up on all the ideas that have come out there. I maybe should have started over. We know each other well in this room, but for those online who aren't familiar with the Cluster Munition Coalition, just a bit of background, we are just that. We are a coalition of civil society actors, whether they be individuals, so it could be a student, an academic, or non-governmental organizations around the world, usually coalesced in country coalitions, but it can be anyone and anywhere that shares our goals of getting rid of cluster munitions once and for all. So we are open to involvement from anyone out there, and I urge you to get in touch with us. You can look at, this is not supposed to be self-promotion, but merely a way to ensure that those that want to be involved and that don't represent a government or an international organization can be involved, and know that we have sort of an open umbrella for everyone, and really hope to take some of these ideas and follow up with them, because we're all about bringing voices from the field to the work of us all in Geneva at the global level to make sure that policies are informed by what's happening in the field and by new and creative ideas. So we really look forward to hearing the ideas and taking them forward, both through the Youth Fellows program, but also in our own work, profile them on our website, and to continue to partner with Mexico and the ISU to make sure all those ideas are heard and followed up on. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer the question on the PhD, because I felt a little bit close to that as a former PhD candidate myself. I know it's very difficult to engage and to especially, I mean, a PhD is a long journey, and I mean, loneliness tends to affect PhD candidates. But I can say honestly that on mine action nowadays we do have a lot of resources online, and from the Geneva Center, I know that the Youth for Disarmament has an education platform that is the EU non-proliferation what's going on, you know, proliferation web consortium. A website, and so every kind of material is very helpful, and it's also another recommendation. Nothing is never too basic. So it's good that to start and familiarize with all the technicalities. So like Tamar was saying, the coalition and the campaign have a wonderful landmine monitor that can be used as a tool. We also have Mine Action Review, that is also another, and the Cluster Munition Clearance Review, that are other important tools. And you know, and also the other thing that I want to share with the audience, because I had to use this opportunity and to resist and develop resilience, because at the end of a PhD, opportunities start to actually show themselves, and I can just share a little bit of a personal thing on the other side of this panel. Maya actually is the author of an article that inspired my PhD. And I was really happy to basically meet her during the Conference of States Parties a few years ago. So things actually happen. Things actually happen, and you end up meeting the authors of articles that inspired you in your journey. So, and like Tamar was saying, just reach out, because at the end of the day, I mean, we are all humans, and sooner or later we reply emails, and we are happy to help and support.
Thank you, Ricardo. Maybe Mariana could share information about the logistic contest for ending the event.
Yes. Well, yes. I already requested Jared.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So yeah, for the logistics, very quickly, just they will be published in the webpage of the MSP12 of the Cluster Munitions. So there it has the information of the different type of submissions that it will have, the specific guidelines for submissions, which have the format, the length, the language, and other considerations. It also has the participation criteria, the evaluation criteria, and just very briefly for the timeline. So today is the launch of the contest, which, as has been mentioned, is the International Day for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Awareness. Then the submission deadline is the 16th of June of 2024. The selection of the winners would be June, July 2024. And we will contact them by July, and then it would be the presentation of the results during the MSP12. So those are the basic dates, but in the webpage of the MSP12, you will find the very detailed baselines of information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alonso. So I think we finished the event finally. So thank you so much, all the panelists and the delegates and organizations. So thank you so much. So we launched the contest, so we need a lot of participants. Thank you so much.